The air in the car was thick with silence, broken only by the hum of tires on the road. Sarah sat beside me, scrolling through her phone, her perfectly manicured nails tapping lightly on the screen. I tried to start a conversation, but her curt, distracted responses made it clear she wasn't interested. Her indifference had become a familiar refrain in our once loving marriage. I shook it off, chalking it up to the stress of her upcoming trip. We were on the way to the airport, after all. It wasn't until later that I realized this drive was more than just a goodbye, it was the unraveling of everything I thought I knew about my life. As we approached a red light, Sarah glanced at the rearview mirror and shifted uneasily in her seat. "You sure you don't mind me leaving early this morning?" she asked, forcing a brittle smile. "Of course not," I replied, masking the unease growing in my gut. She'd been acting strange for weeks, but I couldn't pinpoint why. Late nights at work, secretive phone calls, and now, an airport drop-off that seemed more forced than usual. Before I could press her, a deep voice growled from the back seat. "Change of plans, motherf *******. My heart stopped. I hadn't even noticed someone slipping into the car. Turning my head ever so slightly, I caught a glimpse of a masked man pointing a gun at my head. "Don't do anything stupid, or you'll regret it," he snarled. Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her face. But what struck me wasn't her fear, it was the familiarity in her reaction. The stranger's voice wasn't just commanding, it was practiced, deliberate, like they'd done this before. The masked man barked at Sarah, "Quickly, give me the secret phone you used to talk to your lover." My jaw dropped. What the hell is he talking about? I stammered, glancing at Sarah. Her face drained of color as she fumbled with her handbag, producing a second phone I'd never seen before. The man snatched it from her with a smirk. "Thanks, sweetheart," he sneered, his words dripping with venom. My mind reeled. Sweetheart? Who the hell was this guy? And why did Sarah have a second phone? The light turned green, and the man shouted, "Drive. Don't look back, don't stop, or I'll make sure this ends badly for you." Terror gripped me as I followed his orders, my thoughts racing. How had this become my life? Just hours ago, I was a husband trying to salvage a strained marriage. Now, I was a pawn in some bizarre nightmare I didn't understand. Sarah sobbed beside me, but her tears didn't feel genuine. They felt calculated, rehearsed. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, but with a gun at my head, all I could do was grip the wheel and pray. The man leaned forward, his breath hot against my neck. "Keep driving. We're not done yet." The car sliced through the early morning haze, the silence inside suffocating. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, and every breath felt like it might be my last. The masked man's gun stayed trained on my head, while Sarah sat stiffly beside me, clutching her purse like it contained the last scraps of her dignity. "Take the next left," the man barked. His voice was low, dangerous. I followed his command, turning onto an empty side road. The hum of traffic faded behind us, leaving only the sound of my pounding heartbeat and Sarah's ragged breathing. My eyes darted to her for a split second, and I caught something in her expression, something I couldn't place. Was it fear? Guilt? Or something darker? "You're gonna pull into that parking lot up ahead," the masked man ordered. It was a deserted lot next to a rundown gas station. I eased the car into a spot and killed the engine. "Okay, listen," I said, my voice trembling as I raised my hand slightly off the wheel. "Whatever this is about, we can fix it. Just let her go. You don't need to." "Shut up," he snapped, pressing the barrel of the gun against the back of my skull. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sarah shift slightly in her seat, her hand sliding down toward her bag. My stomach knotted. The man pointed the gun at her instead. "Don't even think about it, sweetheart. You and I both know you aren't pulling any hero moves today." Sarah froze, her hand mid-motion, and slowly withdrew it. That's when it clicked, the familiarity, the tension, the way they exchanged looks. My wife and this masked stranger weren't strangers at all. "Oh my God," I muttered, realization crashing over me like icy water. "You know him. Don't you, Sarah? You actually know him." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Her lips trembled, and for a second, I thought she'd confess, thought she'd own up to whatever mess we were in. But instead, she turned to the masked man and said in a voice so small it barely registered. "Please, just let him go. You said we wouldn't." "We wouldn't what, Sarah?" I exploded, turning in my seat despite the gun trained on me. "You said you wouldn't what? Set me up? Hand me over like some clueless idiot while you run off with your lover?" Sarah's silence was the only answer I needed. The masked man chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "See? Told you he'd figure it out eventually. Guys like him always do, eventually. Who the hell are you?" I barked at him, fury momentarily overriding my fear. The man tilted his head, the mask crinkling slightly as if he were smirking beneath it. "Let's just say I'm the guy who's been keeping your wife very entertained while you've been playing clueless husband at home." Sarah's eyes welled up with tears, but not the kind you'd expect from someone caught red-handed. No, these were tears of self-pity, not remorse. "You disgust me," I spat at her. "After everything we've been through, this is how you repay me?" "Okay, enough melodrama," the masked man interrupted. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to hand over your wallet, your phone, and any other valuables you've got. Then Sarah and I are going to have a little chat. And if you're lucky, I'll leave you here in one piece." His casual tone made my blood boil. I glanced at Sarah, searching her face for any sign of remorse, any glimmer of the woman I married. But she was gone, replaced by someone cold, distant, and utterly unfamiliar. "I'm not giving you anything," I said firmly, my voice low and steady. The masked man's eyes narrowed behind the slits in his mask. "Wrong answer, hero." He swung the butt of the gun toward me, but I was ready. I jerked the door handle and threw my weight sideways, crashing out of the car. The gun went off, bang, and the sound ripped through the quiet morning air. Adrenaline surged through me as I scrambled to my feet, my knees scraping against the pavement. I didn't stop to check if I was hit, I just ran. Behind me, I heard Sarah scream. "Stop him. Don't let him go." Those words shattered something inside me. Sarah wasn't crying for my safety. She wasn't worried about whether or not I'd been shot. No, she was worried about him catching me. My feet pounded against the asphalt as I ducked behind an abandoned dumpster. My chest heaved, and my hands shook violently. My mind raced with fragments of the past few weeks, the late-night texts, the unexplained absences, the cold shoulder every time I tried to get close. It all made sense now. From my hiding spot, I could hear their muffled voices. "Find him," Sarah hissed. "We can't let him get away now." I covered my mouth with my hand to stifle the sound of my ragged breathing. My wife, was conspiring against me. The realization hit me like a freight train, I was never supposed to make it out of that car alive. And Sarah? The woman I loved, the woman I'd built my life with, she was willing to stand by and watch it happen. But if they thought I was going to roll over and die quietly, they were dead wrong. The sharp chill of the morning air burned my lungs as I crouched behind the rusted dumpster. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out everything except the faint sound of Sarah's frantic voice and the heavy boots of her lover pacing the asphalt. "Where the hell did he go?" the masked man barked. Sarah's voice wavered, but her words cut deep. "He couldn't have gotten far. Find him, Jason. Jason. His name is Jason." The name slashed through my mind like a rusty knife. The mask was slipping, both literally and figuratively. He wasn't some anonymous thug, he was Jason. A man Sarah had been seeing behind my back. A man she trusted enough to scheme with, to plan this. I gritted my teeth, the rage bubbling inside me threatening to erupt. But anger wouldn't save me right now, cunning would. The heavy footsteps grew fainter as Jason moved further into the lot. I peeked around the corner of the dumpster and spotted Sarah standing by the car, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her phone was in her hand, the secret phone. She was scrolling, typing something. Calling someone, maybe. I couldn't stay here. I had to move. Slowly, silently, I crept along the edge of the dumpster and darted toward the gas station building. My shoes barely made a sound against the cracked pavement, but every movement felt amplified in my ears. The gas station was long abandoned, broken windows, graffiti-stained walls, and an overturned trash bin blocking the entrance. I ducked inside, pressing my back against the wall and trying to slow my frantic breathing. From outside, I heard Jason's angry shout. "He's not here, Sarah." "He's smarter than I thought," Sarah muttered bitterly. "But it doesn't matter. He can't run forever." I clenched my fists so tightly my nails bit into my palms. Her voice, so cold, so detached, was unrecognizable. This was the same woman who used to fall asleep on my chest after long nights talking about our dreams, our future. And now, she was plotting my end with her boyfriend. My phone. It was still in my pocket. My hands trembled as I pulled it out, but reality crashed over me like a wave. I had no signal. Of course. The only way out of this was through them. I peeked around the edge of the window frame, spotting Jason stomping back toward the car, gun still in hand. He was furious, waving his arms as he yelled at Sarah. And then, just like that, I saw it, a chance. Jason was pacing, distracted. Sarah was turned away from him, still fixated on her phone. If I moved now, if I was fast enough. I bolted. My feet hit the pavement hard as I sprinted toward them, gravel crunching beneath my soles. Jason spun around, eyes wide behind the mask. "Hey," he shouted, raising the gun. But I was already there. My shoulder slammed into him, and we went down in a tangle of limbs. The gun clattered to the ground, spinning away across the pavement. Jason roared, swinging his fist into my ribs, but I was fueled by something raw, something primal. I grabbed his head and smashed it into the concrete. Once. Twice. Sarah screamed, dropping her phone as she backed away. "Derek! Stop!" she shrieked. But I didn't stop. Not until Jason stopped moving. His chest rose and fell weakly, and blood trickled from his forehead. I staggered to my feet, chest heaving, and turned to face Sarah. She was trembling, mascara streaked down her cheeks, but even now, even in this moment, her eyes still held something sharp. Defiance. "You're insane," she spat, her voice trembling but venomous. "I'm insane?" I barked, stepping closer. "You set me up, Sarah. You were ready to let this guy blow my brains out in cold blood. And you want to call me insane?" She backed away, hands raised. "You don't understand, Derek. You've always been so boring. So predictable. You wouldn't understand what it feels like to actually live." The words cut deeper than any knife. "Live?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "You call this living? Plotting your husband's death with your side piece? Do you hear yourself right now, Sarah? Do you even know who you are anymore?" For a brief second, something flickered in her eyes, remorse, maybe, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She lunged for Jason's gun. I reacted without thinking, kicking it away before she could reach it. The gun skidded across the pavement and disappeared under the car. Sarah froze, her eyes wide with panic. "Don't," I warned, my voice low and dangerous. Her shoulders slumped, and she let out a shaky breath. "Derek, please." But I'd had enough. No more lies, Sarah. No more excuses. I turned and walked away, grabbing Jason's phone from his pocket as I passed his unconscious body. I didn't look back at Sarah, didn't stop to hear whatever pathetic explanation she was about to spit out. I just walked. The sun was starting to rise over the horizon, casting long shadows across the lot. I thumbed through Jason's phone, scrolling past texts, pictures, so many pictures. All of her. All of them. My stomach turned, but my steps never faltered. The sun crept higher over the horizon as I walked down the cracked asphalt road, Jason's phone clutched tightly in my hand. My heart still pounded in my chest, and my head throbbed from the adrenaline crash. Behind me, the car and the wreckage of my life grew smaller with each step. I thumbed through the phone again, bile rising in my throat as I stared at the texts. "Sarah, can't wait to see you again. He's such an idiot. Doesn't suspect a thing. Jason, don't worry, babe. Soon, he won't be in the picture at all. Just stick to the plan. Sarah, I'm scared he'll figure it out. He's been asking questions. Jason, relax. Once you're on that plane, we're free." The final message stopped me dead in my tracks. "Jason, make sure he doesn't leave the parking lot alive." I squeezed the phone so hard I thought it might crack. Every word felt like another stab in the chest. How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? Years? I'd been so blind, so trusting. A faint sound behind me caught my attention, a car door slamming. I turned my head slightly and saw Sarah sprinting toward me, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Derek," she screamed, her voice shrill and panicked. "Please. Wait. We can fix this." I kept walking. "Derek," she shouted again, louder this time. I spun around, my chest heaving with anger. "Fix this? Fix this, Sarah? Do you even hear yourself? You were ready to let me die." Tears streaked her face, her makeup smudged and smeared, but I wasn't buying the performance anymore. I'd seen the truth, and no amount of fake crying would cover it up. "Jason said he wouldn't hurt you," she blurted out. "He said it was just to scare you, to get you out of the way for a while." I laughed bitterly, holding up the phone. "Is that what he said, Sarah? Because according to this, he planned to make sure I never left that parking lot." She froze, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for something, anything, to say. "Say it, Sarah. Say the truth," I pressed, stepping closer. "You wanted me dead, didn't you? You wanted to fly off into the sunset with your masked boyfriend while they found my body in some ditch. Didn't you?" Her lips trembled, and then, she nodded. The world tilted slightly, and my vision narrowed. I had known the answer already, but hearing it, seeing her admit it, was something else entirely. "You're a monster," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "I don't even know who you are anymore." She took a step forward, reaching out with trembling hands. "Derek, please. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was scared." Jason pressured me. "I still love you. Stop." My voice cracked like a whip, freezing her mid-step. "Don't you dare say you love me. Love doesn't plan funerals while the other person is still alive." Her face crumpled, and for a split second, I saw something genuine, fear, regret, something real. But it was too late. The distant wail of sirens reached my ears, faint but growing louder. Someone must have heard the gunshot or seen the fight. Sarah heard them too, her head snapping toward the sound. "What are you going to do now, Sarah?" I asked, my voice low. "Run? Tell them it was all Jason's fault? That you had nothing to do with it?" Her eyes darted back to me, wide with panic. "Derek, please, you can't tell them. You can't. They'll arrest me. My life will be over." "Your life?" I said, stepping closer. "What about my life, Sarah? The one you were ready to throw away like garbage? What about our life, the one you burned to the ground for this?" She opened her mouth to reply, but I didn't wait to hear it. I turned and started walking again, my feet moving faster now as the sirens grew louder. "Where are you going?" she screamed after me. "Anywhere you're not." By the time the police cars skidded into the parking lot, I was standing at the edge of the gas station property, Jason's phone still clutched in my hand. Officers poured out of their vehicles, guns drawn, shouting orders at Sarah, who was still standing near the car, mascara-streaked and frantic. I raised my hands as an officer approached me, his weapon pointed at my chest. "Whoa! I'm unarmed. I'm unarmed." The officer lowered his gun slightly. "What happened here?" I took a deep breath, holding up the phone. "You'll want to see this." They cuffed Sarah. Her wailing screams echoed through the lot as they placed her in the back of a squad car. I watched it all unfold with a numb sense of detachment, like I was watching someone else's life. Jason was loaded onto a stretcher, unconscious but alive. An officer led me to the back of a police cruiser and offered me a bottle of water. I sat down on the edge of the open door, staring at the horizon as the first proper rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of gold and pink. The world felt still. Empty. Everything I thought I knew about my life had been reduced to ash in a single morning. The woman I loved, the woman I had promised forever to, had become a stranger. A villain in my story. But I wasn't dead. I was alive. And that meant I still had choices to make. The officer returned, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Hayes, we'll need your full statement back at the station." I nodded slowly, pushing myself to my feet. Yeah, let's get this over with." As I climbed into the back of the police cruiser, one thought cut through the haze of exhaustion and grief. This wasn't the end. Not for me. The cold fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed faintly overhead as I sat in a cramped interrogation room. A half-empty styrofoam cup of coffee sat untouched in front of me, its bitter aroma filling the stale air. My reflection stared back at me from the one-way mirror, a hollow-eyed man with blood smeared on his shirt and bruises blooming along his jaw. Detective Ramirez, a sharp-eyed man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair, walked in holding a folder. He tossed it onto the metal table and sat across from me, his chair creaking under his weight. "Rough morning, huh, Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice calm but firm. I let out a humorless chuckle. "You could say that." Ramirez flipped open the folder and pulled out a few printed photos. They were grainy screenshots from Jason's phone, messages, photos, all of them incriminating. My stomach turned at the sight of Sarah smiling in one of them, her lips pressed against Jason's cheek. "We've gone through Jason's phone, Derek," Ramirez said, his tone softer now. "It's pretty damning stuff. Your wife wasn't just cheating, this was premeditated. They planned to get you out of the picture permanently." I rubbed my face with trembling hands, the weight of the words sinking into my bones. "What happens now?" "Jason's still unconscious, but when he wakes up, he'll be facing charges for attempted murder, conspiracy, and a few other fun ones. Your wife, though, she's a little more complicated." I looked up sharply. "Complicated? How?" Ramirez leaned forward, clasping his hands together. "She's claiming Jason manipulated her. That he was abusive, controlling. She's painting herself as a scared woman who got in over her head." I slammed my fist onto the table, making the coffee cup jump. "Are you kidding me? She was in on it, detective." She handed him the damn phone, told him where to find me, watched as he held a gun to my head. Ramirez nodded calmly. I believe you, Derek. But courtrooms don't care about emotions, they care about evidence. And right now, Sarah's playing the victim card hard. I leaned back in my chair, chest heaving with frustration. She was going to try to slither out of this. Of course she was. Sarah had always been good at spinning stories, making herself look like the wounded bird in every situation. What do I do? I asked finally, my voice low and defeated. Ramirez slid Jason's phone across the table to me. Keep this. Make copies of everything on it. And get yourself a damn good lawyer. You'll need it. It felt like hours later when I finally stepped out of the police station. The morning sun was higher now, blinding and sharp. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Sarah. Her name flashed across the screen, her profile picture still one of our wedding photos. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. What do you want, Sarah? I said, my voice cold. Derek, she sobbed on the other end. Please, you have to believe me. Jason was crazy. He forced me into everything. I didn't know what to do. I clenched my jaw, my free hand balling into a fist. Stop lying, Sarah. I saw the texts. I heard everything. You didn't look scared when you handed him the phone. You didn't look scared when you told him where to find me. She went silent for a moment, her fake sobs evaporating into a tense silence. Then her voice dropped into something sharper, colder. Fine. You want the truth, Derek? You were boring. You were weak. Jason made me feel alive. And yeah, maybe we took things too far, but you weren't supposed to fight back. You were supposed to just go away. My breath caught in my throat. There it was, the real Sarah. The cruel, venomous woman I'd been blind to for so long. You're going to jail, Sarah, I said flatly. And when this is all over, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. She laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. Oh, Derek. You think you're the hero here? You think anyone's going to believe you over me? I'll have half the world feeling sorry for me by the time this is done. The call went dead. I lowered the phone from my ear and stared out at the busy street in front of the station. 2 days later, I sat across from my lawyer, Mark Holloway, in his sleek downtown office. Mark was a sharp, no-nonsense man in his late 30s with sharp suits and sharper instincts. You're in a mess, Derek, he said, sifting through the mountain of evidence I'd brought him. But we have enough here to bury both Jason and Sarah in court. The problem is public perception. I frowned. What do you mean? Sarah's building a narrative, Derek. She's painting herself as a victim of Jason's manipulation and your emotional instability. I laughed bitterly. Emotional instability? She tried to have me killed. Doesn't matter. The court of public opinion is going to eat her sob story up unless we fight back. We have to get ahead of this. I nodded slowly. So what do we do? Mark smirked and leaned back in his chair. We fight dirty. We release the messages, the photos, everything. We let the world see the real Sarah Hayes. No more masks. No more stories. I swallowed hard. Part of me hated the idea of airing out my dirty laundry in public, but another part, the angry, broken part, wanted everyone to see what she'd done. Do it, I said firmly. Mark nodded and stood up, extending his hand. We'll take them down, Derek. Both of them. As I left the office and stepped into the cool evening air, I felt something I hadn't felt since that gun pressed against the back of my skull, hope. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But I was done being the victim. The storm hit hard 2 days after Mark released the evidence. It wasn't a physical storm, but the kind that comes with headlines, viral posts, and endless noise from every corner of the internet. Local wife involved in murder plot against husband, text messages reveal shocking details. Betrayal and deception, the Sarah Hayes scandal. Who is the real victim? Twisted tale of infidelity and murder unfolds. Sarah's carefully crafted victim narrative had taken a hit, hard. Screenshots of her texts with Jason were everywhere. Her name was trending on social media, and people were picking sides. Some still clung to her story, calling her a frightened woman manipulated by a dangerous man. Others saw right through her performance and ripped her apart in the comment sections. Meanwhile, I sat in my dark living room, whiskey glass in hand, scrolling through the chaos on my phone. This guy went through hell. Imagine finding out your wife wants you dead. Sarah's lying. You can tell from the messages. She's cold-blooded. Honestly, Derek is pathetic. How did he not see this coming? That last one stung more than I wanted to admit. The doorbell rang, cutting through the silence. I set the whiskey down, grabbed the baseball bat I'd been keeping by the door, and peeked through the peephole. It was Sarah. She was standing there in a hoodie and sunglasses, looking more like a celebrity dodging paparazzi than a woman accused of conspiracy to murder her husband. Against my better judgment, I cracked the door open slightly. "What the hell are you doing here, Sarah?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. She pulled off her sunglasses, her mascara-streaked eyes locking onto mine. "Derek, please let me in. We need to talk." I stared at her for a long moment before stepping aside and letting her into the living room. She walked in cautiously, her eyes darting to the whiskey glass and the bat by the door. "I shouldn't have let you in," I said flatly. "You've got 10 minutes. Talk." She sank onto the couch, her hands trembling as she clasped them in her lap. "Everything's falling apart, Derek," she said, her voice quivering. "People are calling me a monster. My family won't even return my calls. I didn't think it would end up like this." I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. "What did you think would happen, Sarah? That Jason would kill me, and you'd ride off into the sunset without consequences? Are you that delusional?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No sympathy. No pity. Just a cold emptiness. "I was scared," she whispered. "Jason, he pushed me. He said we had to get rid of you, or he'd hurt me too." I let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, come on, Sarah. You're still running this victim routine? You had every chance to back out. You could have told me. You could have gone to the police. But no, you handed him a burner phone and plotted my death." Her face twisted with frustration, and the mask slipped for just a moment. "Do you think this is easy for me, Derek? Do you think I wanted any of this?" I stepped closer, my voice low and sharp. "No, Sarah. I think you wanted exactly this. You wanted me gone so you and Jason could have your little fantasy life. And when things went sideways, you decided to play the victim." She flinched at my words, her lower lip trembling. "Why are you really here, Sarah?" I asked. "Because if you're expecting me to forgive you, you're even more delusional than I thought." She hesitated, her eyes darting toward her bag. Then she pulled out a manila envelope and held it out toward me. "What's this?" I asked. "Jason woke up," she said softly. "He's awake, and he's talking. But not just about me, about you." I snatched the envelope and tore it open. Inside were copies of emails, messages, and a document, an accusation from Jason claiming I had known about the plan all along, that I had been in on it until things went wrong. "They're trying to pin this on me?" I said, disbelief flooding my voice. Sarah nodded. "Jason's saying you were in on the plan, that you changed your mind at the last second and tried to double-cross him. He's trying to make you look like the mastermind. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore, this was about survival. Jason was trying to drag me down with him, and Sarah, well, she was playing both sides. Why show me this? I asked. She looked down, her voice trembling. Because if Jason takes me down, he'll take you down too. And neither of us will walk away from this. I stared at her, my mind racing. Could I trust her? Of course not. But if Jason was twisting the narrative, I had to act fast. Get out, Sarah, I said, pointing to the door. She stood, pulling her sunglasses back on. Derek. I don't want to go to prison. You should have thought about that before you handed Jason the phone, I said coldly. She hesitated for a moment before walking to the door. As it closed behind her, I collapsed onto the couch, clutching the envelope in my hands. Mark's office was quiet as he skimmed through the contents of the envelope. His jaw clenched, and he let out a long breath. This changes everything, he said. If Jason's framing you, we need to get ahead of this, fast. Otherwise, you could end up in just as much trouble as they are. What do we do? I asked. Mark leaned back, tapping his pen against his desk. We need to find something, anything, that ties Jason and Sarah together without you in the picture. Something undeniable. My mind raced. Jason was in a hospital bed under police guard, Sarah was weaving her web of lies, and the clock was ticking. Where do we start? I asked. Mark smirked. Simple. We dig into every corner of their lives. Emails, social media, financial records. Somewhere in their mess of lies, there's a thread we can pull, and when we do, the whole thing will come crashing down. I nodded, a spark of determination flickering in my chest. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about justice. And I wasn't stopping until every last one of them was exposed. The night was suffocating. The air in my small living room felt thick, and the clock on the wall ticked far too loudly. My laptop glowed in the dark as I scrolled through hundreds of documents Mark had sent over, bank statements, emails, social media records, and encrypted messages between Sarah and Jason. Every file felt like another sharp edge digging into my ribs. Mark had been right, somewhere in this mess was the golden thread. The one detail that would unravel everything. But I was tired. So goddamn tired. A notification pinged on my phone. It was a message from an unknown number. Stop digging, Derek. You won't like what you find. Final warning. My stomach knotted, and my eyes darted to the window. Was someone watching me? I pulled the curtain aside and scanned the street. Nothing. Just the faint orange glow of streetlights and empty sidewalks. The next morning, Mark and I met at a rundown diner on the outskirts of town. The kind of place where the coffee tastes like motor oil, but nobody asks too many questions. Mark had a grim look on his face as he dropped a thick stack of papers onto the table between us. You're not going to like this, he said, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. What now? I asked, bracing myself. He tapped the top document with his finger. Financial records. Sarah and Jason had a shared offshore account. Looks like they were funneling money into it for months. But here's the kicker, they transferred a massive sum into a third-party account just a day before your little airport incident. I leaned forward. Whose account? Mark hesitated before sliding another paper across the table. My blood went cold. The name on the account was someone I knew. Ben Carter. Ben was one of my oldest friends. He'd been the best man at my wedding. We'd spent years working together before he moved out of state. Ben? I choked out. What does he have to do with this? Mark sighed. I don't know yet. But his name is on that account, and the timing is too perfect to ignore. I felt the world tilt slightly. First Sarah, then Jason, and now Ben. Was there anyone left in my life who hadn't betrayed me? That evening, I called Ben. "Hey, Derek," he answered, his voice casual, as if everything was fine. "Ben, we need to talk. In person." There was a pause on the other end. Sure. Everything okay? Just meet me at our old spot by the lake. Tonight. 9 o'clock. Alright, man. See you there." I hung up and stared at my phone. My gut twisted with anxiety. The lake was calm when I arrived. Moonlight danced on the water's surface, and the only sound was the faint chirping of crickets. I stood near the edge of the dock, my hands shoved into my jacket pockets, trying to steady my breathing. Headlights cut through the darkness, and Ben's car rolled up. He stepped out, wearing his usual jeans and flannel shirt, hands stuffed into his pockets. "Derek," he said cautiously as he approached. "You look like hell, man." "Cut the crap, Ben," I said sharply. "I know about the offshore account. I know about the money Sarah and Jason transferred to you. What the hell is going on?" Ben froze, his face pale under the moonlight. "Derek, listen." "No." I snapped, stepping closer. "You don't get to listen your way out of this. You were supposed to be my friend. What did they promise you, huh? Money? A cut of their little paradise?" He raised his hands in surrender. "It's not what you think." "Oh, it's exactly what I think," I growled. "You knew, Ben. You knew they were planning to kill me, and you took their dirty money anyway." His voice cracked. "I didn't know they were going that far, Derek. I swear to God, I thought it was just, I don't know, a business deal. Jason told me it was something about investments overseas. I didn't ask questions." I let out a bitter laugh. "Don't insult me, Ben. You're smarter than that. You knew." Tears welled in his eyes, and for a moment, I almost believed him. But then he made his mistake, his hand twitched toward his jacket pocket. Instinct kicked in. I lunged at him, grabbing his wrist and twisting it behind his back. Something metallic fell to the ground with a clatter, a small pistol. We struggled on the gravel path, his voice a strained whisper. "Derek, please." I pushed him away, and he stumbled backward, panting. The gun was at my feet, and I kicked it into the lake without hesitation. "You were going to kill me too, weren't you?" I said softly. Ben didn't answer. His head hung low, shoulders trembling. "Go," I said through gritted teeth. "Before I change my mind." He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen, and then turned and sprinted back to his car. The tires screeched as he sped away into the night. When I got home, I collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number. "You're running out of time, Derek. Stop before it's too late." I threw my phone across the room, and it hit the wall with a dull thud. This wasn't just about Sarah and Jason anymore. This conspiracy ran deeper than I could have imagined, and now Ben was tangled in it too. But one thing was clear, I wasn't safe. No matter where I turned, someone was watching. Someone was planning. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. There was only one person left who might have answers, Jason. And whether he was in a hospital bed or not, I was going to get them. The hospital halls were silent at midnight, lit by the cold, sterile glow of fluorescent lights. I walked with purpose, my boots echoing off the polished floor. Jason's room was at the end of the corridor, guarded by a single tired-looking officer flipping through his phone. "Visiting hours are over, buddy," the officer said, barely glancing up. I pulled a badge out of my jacket pocket. Mark had managed to get me a fake police ID. The officer squinted at it, shrugged, and stepped aside. "Make it quick," he muttered. I pushed the door open and slipped inside. Jason was propped up in bed, tubes snaking into his arm, a monitor beeping steadily. His face was pale, hollow, but those sharp eyes still carried that same smug arrogance. Well, he rasped, a crooked smile pulling at his lips. "Look who decided to pay me a visit. Derek Hayes, the man of the hour." I closed the door behind me, locking it. "We're done playing games, Jason." Jason chuckled weakly. "Oh, Derek. You still think you're the hero in this story, don't you? You're just another pawn on the board." I stepped closer, looming over him. "I know about the offshore accounts. I know about Sarah's texts. I know about Ben. But what I don't know, is why. Why did this all start? Why did you want me dead?" Jason's smile faded, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes, pity, maybe even regret. "Because you were in the way, Derek. Simple as that. Sarah wanted a fresh start, and I wanted her. You were just collateral damage." His words hit me harder than I expected. The casual dismissal of my life, my marriage, my entire existence reduced to nothing more than a footnote in their little romance novel. "You underestimated me," I said through gritted teeth. Jason smirked. "Yeah, I did. But here's the thing, Derek, you've won nothing. You've exposed Sarah, you've exposed me, but do you know what happens next?" He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You go down with us." I froze. Jason's smile widened. "You really think Sarah hasn't been busy? She's been playing both sides, Derek. You're in just as deep as us in the court of public opinion. And the police? They don't care about the truth. They care about evidence." For a moment, the weight of his words pressed down on me. Could he be right? Could Sarah have spun another web while I was too busy chasing shadows? But then I remembered something Mark said. Somewhere in their mess of lies, there's a thread we can pull. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder Mark had sent me earlier in the day. "Do you recognize this?" I asked, holding up a screenshot of a bank transfer, one Jason had made without Sarah's knowledge. Jason's smile faltered. "That's right," I said softly. "You were planning to cut her out, weren't you? You were going to take the money and disappear without her. She doesn't know about this, does she?" Jason's breathing grew shallow, his smirk replaced by something raw and desperate. "Tell me, Jason. How do you think Sarah will react when she finds out you were double-crossing her? Do you think she'll protect you? Or do you think she'll bury you to save herself?" Jason's hand clenched the sheets, his eyes darting toward the door. I stepped back, pocketing my phone. "Good luck explaining this when she finds out. Oh, and Jason, enjoy your hospital food." I turned and walked out, leaving him gasping for air in his bed. The sun was rising when I pulled into my driveway. The weight of the past few weeks pressed on me like an anchor tied to my chest. My phone buzzed with a message from Mark. "Sarah's been arrested. She tried to flee the state last night. The cops have the full file on Jason now too. It's over, Derek." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was over. But the victory felt hollow. My marriage was destroyed. My trust in people, shattered. And the life I had built was nothing but smoldering ruins. A month later, I sat across from Mark in the same diner where we'd pieced this nightmare together. "You okay?" he asked, sipping his coffee. I nodded slowly. "Getting there. Sarah's trial starts next week. Jason's probably going to flip on her to get a lighter sentence, but they're both done." Mark leaned back in his chair, studying me. "And you? What's next for you, Derek?" I stared out the window at the sunrise breaking over the horizon. I don't know, I admitted. But whatever it is, it won't involve looking over my shoulder anymore. Mark raised his mug in a silent toast, and I clinked mine against his. Epilogue. Sarah was sentenced to 20 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder and financial fraud. Jason, ever the coward, took a plea deal and got 15. Ben disappeared into obscurity, his reputation destroyed. As for me, I sold the house. Packed up my things. Started over in a new city with a clean slate. Trust didn't come easily anymore, and maybe it never would again. But every day, I reminded myself of one simple truth. Sometimes, survival is the only victory you need. And with that, I walked forward, leaving the wreckage of my past behind me. The end.